Welcome to Reddit Courtroom Drama, the channel dedicated to intense courtroom stories. Not the same old cheating stories you see everywhere. If you want fresh, gripping drama, hit subscribe and join us. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It buries the person who tried to bury you first. I never imagined I'd be sitting in a courtroom, defending myself against accusations of financial abuse from the woman I'd spent 12 years building a life with. But there I was, 3 months into a divorce that had turned into a legal nightmare, watching my ex-wife Lydia paint me as a controlling monster who manipulated every dollar that passed through our marriage. The worst part, I almost believed she'd win. It started the way most divorces do, with hope that we could handle things civilly. Lydia and I had been married for 12 years. We had 2 kids, Cameron, who was 9, and little Zoe, who had just turned 6. The marriage hadn't been perfect, but I thought we'd been partners. I worked as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. Lydia had been a nurse before Cameron was born. Then she'd chosen to stay home with the kids. Money had never been a huge issue between us. We lived comfortably in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. We took family vacations. The kids were in good schools. I made decent money, around $120,000 a year. And we had a joint checking account plus a savings account for emergencies. When Lydia asked for the divorce, I was surprised but not devastated. We'd grown apart. I got it. I told her we'd split things fairly, work out custody, and move on. She agreed. We even shook hands on it. That civility lasted exactly 2 weeks. Then I got served with papers that made my blood run cold. Lydia wasn't just asking for divorce anymore. She was suing for full custody, claiming I'd been financially abusive throughout our entire marriage, according to her filing. I had controlled all the money, denied her access to accounts, forced her to beg for basic necessities, and hidden assets to keep her dependent on me. None of it was true, but when I read through her affidavit, I realized how carefully she'd constructed the lie. She claimed I gave her an allowance of $200 a week for groceries and household items. She said I monitored every purchase she made. She stated that I refused to let her have her own credit card or access to our savings. She painted a picture of financial imprisonment that would make any judge furious. I sat in my lawyer's office, hands shaking, as I tried to process what was happening. "This is insane," I said to my attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Alvarez who'd handled business litigation for years before moving into family law. "We had joint accounts. She had full access to everything. She used our credit cards whenever she wanted. This is complete fiction." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "Can you prove that?" "Of course I can prove it. Our accounts are joint. Her name is on everything." "Good," Patricia said. "But here's what you need to understand. Financial abuse cases are taken very seriously, especially when children are involved. If she can make this stick, even partially, you're looking at supervised visitation at best. We need to be thorough. We need bank records, credit card statements, everything." "Then get them," I said. Got nothing to hide. We spent the next 2 weeks gathering documentation. I pulled statements going back 5 years, joint checking accounts showing both our names, credit cards in both our names. I even found receipts for purchases Lydia had made, hundreds of them, showing she'd had complete freedom to spend. But Lydia's legal team was smart. They didn't deny she'd had access to accounts. Instead, they argued that I'd created an environment of psychological control where she felt she couldn't spend money without my approval. They brought in a therapist who testified about patterns of coercive control. They had Lydia's sister testify that she'd witnessed me interrogating Lydia about purchases. It was maddening. Every innocent conversation we'd ever had about money was being twisted into evidence of abuse. The time I'd asked why our grocery bill was so high one month, Lydia's lawyer framed it as intimidation. Time I'd suggested we cut back on eating out to save for Cameron's braces. They called it deprivation. The hearing for temporary custody was brutal. I sat there listening to Lydia sob on the stand, describing years of alleged control and fear. She talked about having to sneak money from the grocery budget to buy herself clothes. She claimed I'd once refused to let her spend $20 on a haircut. "I felt like a prisoner in my own marriage," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't make a single decision without worrying about his reaction. Every purchase, every dollar, it all had to go through him first." I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and call her a liar right there, but Patricia had warned me, "Stay calm, show control, let the evidence speak." The judge, a stern woman named Helen Ortega, granted Lydia temporary primary custody. I got supervised visitation every other weekend. The message was clear. Until I could prove these accusations false, I was being treated as a potential threat to my own children. Driving home from that hearing, I felt like my entire life had been stolen. I'd gone from tucking my kids in every night to seeing them 4 days a month, under the watch of a court-appointed supervisor who wrote down everything I said to them. But something kept bothering me, something Patricia had mentioned in passing. Her accusations are very specific, she'd said. The allowance amount. The claims about monitoring purchases. Abusers usually don't keep detailed records. But she's claiming you did. That means somewhere. There might be records that contradict her story. I thought about that for days. Lydia had been very specific about the $200 weekly allowance. She'd even testified about the exact way I allegedly gave it to her. Cash every Sunday morning, but I hadn't given her cash allowances. We'd never operated that way, so where had that detail come from? One night, unable to sleep, I started going through old files on my computer. Tax returns, mortgage documents, and then I found something interesting. Our accountant had once asked us to track our monthly expenses for tax purposes. This was about 4 years ago, when I'd been considering starting a side consulting business and needed to understand our financial baseline. Completely forgotten about it. But there in my documents folder was a spreadsheet, filled out by Lydia, showing her tracked expenses for 3 months. I opened it, and my heart started racing. In those 3 months, Lydia had documented spending $4,000, $3,800, and $4,200 respectively. The spreadsheet was detailed: groceries, household items, kids' activities, her personal purchases. Everything was there. This wasn't a woman on a $200 weekly allowance. This was someone spending freely and documenting it herself. I called Patricia immediately. I found something the next morning. I was in her office showing her the spreadsheet. She studied it carefully, her expression shifting from interested to very interested. This is good, she said, but it's 4 years old. They'll argue patterns can change. We need more recent evidence. How do I get that? Patricia smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who'd just seen an opening. We subpoena her bank records. We already have our joint account records. Not those, Patricia said. Her personal. Counts if she's been claiming financial control. We have a right to examine whether she had access to other funds. Most people who claim financial abuse, the evidence either proves it or contradicts it. We need to see the full picture. I didn't even know Lydia had personal accounts, but Patricia filed the motion anyway, arguing that Lydia's financial claims required a complete review of both parties' financial access. Lydia's attorney fought it hard. They argued it was invasive and irrelevant. But Judge Ortega surprised everyone by granting the subpoena. She wanted the full financial picture before making permanent custody decisions. 3 weeks later, the documents arrived. Patricia called me on a Saturday morning. You need to get to my office, now. I drove there not knowing what to expect. When I walked into her conference room, Patricia had papers spread across the entire table. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment account summaries. Tell me something, Patricia said. Did you know your wife had 3 personal bank accounts? No. Did you know she had 2 credit cards in her name only? No, I thought everything was joint. Patricia picked up a stack of statements. These accounts have been active for the entire length of your marriage. The oldest one was opened 2 months after your wedding. I stared at the papers, not understanding. What are you saying? I'm saying your wife has had full financial independence for 12 years, and she's been lying about it. But that's not even the interesting part. Patricia spread out more documents. Look at these deposits. I looked. The main personal account, held at a different bank than our joint accounts, showed regular deposits, not paychecks. Lydia hadn't worked in years. These were cash deposits. $2,000 here, $3,000 there, sometimes more. Where is this money coming from? I asked. That's what we're going to ask her in court, Patricia said. Here's what I can tell you. Over the last 5 years, your wife has deposited approximately $240,000 into personal accounts you knew nothing about. The room tilted. That's not possible. It's not just possible, it's documented, and that's not all. Patricia pulled out credit card statements. These cards have been used extensively. Designer clothing, jewelry, spa treatments, hotels. Hotels? Patricia nodded grimly. Frequent charges at the Riverside Inn. The Hampton downtown, always during weekdays, always just for one night. The implication hit me like a truck. She was having an affair, possibly, probably, but right now, I'm more interested in the money, because here's what I think happened. Your wife has been systematically taking money from your joint accounts for years, depositing it into personal accounts, and then spending it on whatever she wanted while claiming to you and now to the court that she was financially controlled. I sat down hard in one of the conference room chairs. How did she get that much money without me noticing? Patricia pulled up our joint checking account statements. Look at your spending patterns. You're consistent. Your paycheck gets deposited. Your share of the mortgage and bills comes out automatically. You use your credit card for most purchases, but here, she pointed to ATM withdrawals and cash advances. These are hers. She's been pulling out cash regularly. 300 here, 500 there, sometimes 1,000 at a time, over 5 years. It adds up. But I never noticed. Because you trusted her, Patricia said simply, And because she was smart about it, she never took enough at once to trigger questions, but consistently, month after month, she was draining thousands. I felt sick. What do we do with this? Patricia's smile returned. We bury her with it. She's accused you of financial abuse. She's claimed she had no access to money. She's painted herself as a victim who couldn't even buy a haircut without permission. We're going to show the judge exactly what kind of victim she really was. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, Patricia's team did a deep dive into every account. They tracked patterns. They matched ATM withdrawals from our joint accounts to deposits in Lydia's personal accounts. They identified over 30 hotel stays at various locations around the city. They also found something else. Wire transfers. Lydia had been sending money, significant amounts, to an account belonging to someone named Trevor Kincaid. A little research revealed that Trevor was a personal trainer at the gym Lydia had joined 2 years ago. He was 28 years old, drove a BMW, and according to his very public Instagram, enjoyed a lifestyle that seemed well beyond what a gym trainer should be able to afford. Patricia wanted to bring Trevor in for deposition. But we didn't have time before the hearing. Instead, she focused on the financial evidence. The story it told was damning enough. The day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom with a different feeling than I'd had before. Before, I'd felt defensive, like I was trying to prove a negative. Now, I felt like I was about to watch justice actually happen. Lydia was already there with her attorney, a slick guy named Brandon Wells who specialized in high-conflict divorces. He was the kind of lawyer who could make a defendant in a murder trial sound sympathetic. He'd done a good job making me look like a monster in the temporary hearing, but when Patricia walked in carrying 3 file boxes full of documents, I saw Wells' expression shift just slightly. He leaned over to whisper to Lydia. She shook her head, saying something back. She looked confident. She wouldn't look confident for long. Judge Ortega took the bench and called the hearing to order. This wasn't a trial. Just an evidentiary hearing to determine if Lydia's accusations had merit before we moved forward with the divorce proceedings. Wells went first, restating Lydia's claims: financial control, limited access, psychological abuse through money management. He was smooth, and without Patricia's evidence, he would have been convincing. Then Patricia stood up. Your Honor, she said, the respondent has made serious allegations against my client. She's claimed financial abuse and control that allegedly lasted throughout their marriage. She's used these claims to justify primary custody and to paint my client as an unfit parent. We're here today to show that not only are these claims false, but that the respondent herself has engaged in systematic financial deception. Wells objected immediately. Your Honor, this is character assassination. Overruled, Judge Ortega said. This hearing is about financial claims. Continue, Ms. Alvarez. Patricia approached the bench and handed Judge Ortega a binder. Your Honor, these are bank statements for 3 accounts held solely in the respondent's name, accounts that were never disclosed to my client during the marriage, accounts that show a pattern of deposits and spending that directly contradicts every claim she's made. Lydia's face had gone pale. Wells stood up. Your Honor, we weren't aware these accounts would be. You fought the subpoena that produced them, Patricia interrupted. You argued they weren't relevant. The court disagreed. Now we're going to show why for the next 40 minutes. Patricia walked Judge Ortega through the evidence, the personal accounts, the cash deposits totaling over $200,000, the credit card charges showing luxury spending, the hotel stays, the wire transfers to Trevor Kincaid with each revelation. Lydia looked smaller in her chair. Wells kept objecting, trying to throw procedural obstacles in the way. But Judge Ortega wanted to hear it all. Finally, Patricia pulled out the spreadsheet. Your Honor, this is a document created by the respondent herself 4 years ago. It shows her tracked expenses over a 3-month period. In those 3 months, she spent over $12,000. This is the same woman claiming she was given a $200 weekly allowance and had to beg for money for haircuts. Judge Ortega studied the spreadsheet, then looked at Lydia directly. Ms. Morrison, I'm going to need you to explain these accounts. Lydia stood up slowly. She looked at her attorney, who nodded. Your Honor, those accounts were. They were for emergencies in case I needed to escape. Escape, Patricia interjected. You took 30 documented hotel stays in 2 years. You wired $50,000 to a personal trainer. You bought designer handbags and jewelry. This wasn't escape money. This was a second life. Your Honor. Wells tried to regain control. Even if the respondent had personal accounts. That doesn't disprove the climate of control. It disproves her testimony, Judge Ortega said flatly. She testified under oath that she had no access to independent funds. She claimed my client controlled all financial decisions. These documents show that not only did she have access, she had substantial hidden assets and was spending freely without his knowledge. The judge looked at more documents. She was depositing cash that came from joint accounts into personal accounts. She was then spending that money on personal expenses while claiming financial abuse. Ms. Wells, this is looking like fraud. Wells stood up quickly. Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance to review these documents more thoroughly. Denied, Judge Ortega said. You've had the same amount of time as opposing counsel. I want the respondent to answer questions now. For the next hour, Patricia systematically destroyed every claim Lydia had made. She asked about specific ATM withdrawals and matched them to deposits. She asked about hotel stays. She asked about Trevor Kincaid. Lydia tried to maintain her story at first. The accounts were for safety. The hotel stays were when she needed to get away from my alleged control. The money to Trevor was for training sessions, but Patricia had receipts. Literally. Credit card statements showing Lydia had also paid for gym memberships at the same gym where Trevor worked. Bank records showing the wire transfers were labeled as gifts, not payment for services. Hotel records showing some stays had been booked for 2 guests. Not one, by the end. Lydia wasn't even trying to answer anymore. She just sat there, staring at the table. While Wells tried to do damage control, Judge Ortega had seen enough. I'm going to be very clear. The evidence presented today shows that Ms. Morrison has systematically lied to this court about her financial circumstances. She's made serious allegations of abuse that appear to be completely fabricated. She's demonstrated deceptive financial behavior throughout her marriage. This is not the behavior of an abuse victim. This is fraud. She turned to Lydia directly. Your claims of financial abuse are dismissed with prejudice. Your request for primary custody is denied. I'm ordering an immediate modification of the temporary custody arrangement. Joint custody will resume pending completion of divorce proceedings. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential perjury charges. Lydia started crying, not the calculated tears from before, but real panic. Wells tried to say something, but Judge Ortega cut him off. We're done here. The custody evaluator's report will be revised based on these findings. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. I sat there, barely able to process what had just happened. Patricia put a hand on my shoulder. Breathe, we won. Crossed the aisle. Lydia was sobbing into her hands. Wells was packing up his briefcase quickly, already distancing himself from the wreckage. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. The woman I'd spent 12 years with had tried to destroy me, had lied to a court, had weaponized our children, all to cover up her own deception. As we walked out of the courtroom, Patricia said quietly, the DA probably won't pursue perjury charges. They rarely do in family court, but her credibility is destroyed. Your divorce will move forward with you in a much stronger position. And custody, she smiled. You'll get what you should have had from the beginning. Over the next 2 months, everything unraveled for Lydia. The custody evaluator interviewed both of us again, with the new evidence in mind. The evaluator's report recommended primary custody to me, with Lydia getting standard visitation. The divorce settlement split assets fairly, but Lydia had to account for the money she'd taken. Over $200,000 came from what should have been marital assets, money that was factored into the final division. Trevor Kincaid, it turned out, had no idea Lydia was married with kids. When Patricia's investigator contacted him, he was shocked. He'd thought Lydia was a divorced single mom who'd gotten a large settlement. The $50,000 she'd sent him was supposed to be an investment in a business he was starting. He actually tried to give it back once he learned the truth, but by then it was all tied up in legal proceedings. The divorce finalized 4 months after that courtroom hearing. I got primary custody. Lydia got supervised visitation initially, then standard visitation after 6 months of compliance with court orders. The house sold, and after accounting for her hidden spending. The split was actually in my favor, but the thing that stayed with me, the thing I still think about, is how close it came to working. If Patricia hadn't pushed for those subpoenas, if we hadn't found those accounts, I would have lost my kids based on complete lies. The system almost allowed it to happen. Cameron and Zoe are with me now. They're adjusting. They ask questions about why things changed, why they don't live with mom anymore, and I answer as honestly as I can without poisoning them against their mother. That's not my job. My job is to be their dad, to give them stability, and to teach them that the truth matters even when it's hard. Lydia moved to an apartment across town. She sees the kids every other weekend and 1 evening a week. The relationship is cordial but cold. We don't talk except about the kids. I don't know if she ever took responsibility for what she did, or if she still believes her own story. I do know this. The justice system is imperfect. It almost failed me completely, but when the truth finally came out, when we could prove what really happened, it did work. Not perfectly, not quickly, but eventually, and sometimes in a courtroom. Eventually is all you get. If this story made you think, hit that subscribe button. Real courtroom drama, real stakes. Real outcomes. This is Reddit courtroom drama, where the truth always finds a way out.